Hello, dwellers of the internet, welcome back. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about God of War 4, even though it is aptly named just God of War, in a sort of reference to how the series isn't really continuing, but they're paying homage to the series while referencing to the fact that it's not exactly a reboot, but sort of just an entire encapsulation of what the series is supposed to represent and what it stands for and what it means to fans, sort of things. It's supposed to be a sort of definitive version of the series. This has been pretty common in practice for a couple of different series for a time. I'm not sure exactly who started it, but someone along the line decided that when creating something artistic, whether that be in the medium of video games, artwork, or film, that if you just give one of the sequels the same exact name as the first one after a certain amount of sequels have been released, and after you have sort of run the gamut on deviation from the original series and from what the original idea was, that if you were to give another sequel after a certain amount of time has passed the same name of the original, that it would signify a little bit more importance to that installment. Now, whether or not that means to a series something that is just used specifically for marketing purposes, or to attempt to generate artificial attraction to it, it depends contextually on the series. I do believe, I'm not discounting that as something that does happen. But it's also meant to signify that the people who are working on it, on whatever project that is being presented to you, are definitely giving their all. They're trying their best, most likely, to not exactly mirror the original, but to go back to a sort of more definitive point in the series than any of the sequels have thus far attempted to create. Especially if the sequels to said franchise, or any series of media, has gone so far as to been repeated at least once a year. If you've had multiple year gaps between the series, that would then, I think, garner a right to establish one of the installments that you've created as a definitive version of it, after you've had a few years to think about the direction you decided for your series to take. But that involves a time gap, and that is probably integral to the series as far as trying to make a statement about a definitive version of it. And there are superficial means by which some companies could take advantage of this trope, but the newest God of War is not called God of War because they're trying to take advantage. They are most definitely not, because what we've been presented with so far is not only a new concept for the genre, a newer and fresher one, but it involves Kratos dealing with a child. Now, this has been done in the past in different installments of the series, but it ties into this one because this is a child that he has had, which is further down in the timeline than the one that he had originally, which he murdered. It was his first child, and if I could bring up a point about this, that many people do, just philosophically and educationally, they say that the first child you have is sort of experimental, and you don't know how to raise a kid at that point. You're learning as you go. When you have your second child, when you have the child by which you can base the experience you've gained from the first one, you then can probably and most likely do a better job. And this theme resonates in the newest God of War because Kratos has another child who has grown into adolescence and is transferring to a certain extent into teenagehood and into adulthood, more so into just the adolescent period in which he is vulnerable to huge ideas and concepts, and most of all actions of his parentage, which Kratos has to worry about. He has to worry about the impact that he possibly left on this child from his actions. And we can tell from this new trailer that it's not only just the impact that he's afraid for his child to feel from his actions, but that it's basically confirmed that he doesn't want his child to know anything about his past or anything about things he has done previously, as far as murdering gods and almost annihilating the entire planet and having to restore it with hope, and killing innocents who got in his way purely for vengeance. Just these horrible, dreaded, gruesome, despicable actions that he took part in, that of course he would be ashamed of when trying to raise a child properly. And think about the fact that Kratos has only had one child, Calliope, of which not only did he lose by his own hand after murdering her in the pursuit of his own ambition, but he had a chance to be with her in Elysium and then end their existence together. But he would rather. This is an example from God of War: Chains of Olympus, where he goes to Hades and finds her through the gates of Elysium. He goes to the land of Elysium, where the pure-hearted individuals are allowed to continue a peaceful existence beyond Hades, where they aren't tortured. And his daughter was one of these deserving sentient beings, deserving souls. He finds her and is able to grant her happiness and to grant himself happiness and possibly free him and forgive himself for what he's done at this point. Find some kind of resolution for his actions in the past by just being with her till the end of existence. But he realizes, as an individual, and as is continuous with his character, or more so to speak, which is a sort of it has a sort of divisive nature from fate itself. He is one who combats it with brute force and the rage that cannot even be quantified or contained by any one person, or by any even godly nature. It is a rage that transcends all the beings around him, and he realizes in this moment that if he is going to save his daughter Calliope, if she is going to live, he has to disappoint her once again. He has to leave her. He has to further solidify himself as an individual in her existence that is unreliable, untrustworthy, that has done her wrong, and that has left her to the wayside to fend for herself and to figure out her own existence without the help of a parent, without the proper guidance of a parent. And not only that, but just before making this decision, he told her, "I'm sorry, Calliope, I will never leave you again." He made a promise, and then he immediately had to break that promise in order to save her life. He made the choice to save her existence and sacrifice her appeal for him for it. He knew that her livelihood and her existence was more important than his satisfaction with how she would perceive him and the life that they could possibly hold together. After that point, it's never really established what kind of relationship Calliope and he would have had. One would assume that they are separate for eternity, because he can never return to Elysium, regardless of any good deeds he had partaken in the future. One could assume that once he killed Hades and finished off the rest of the gods, maybe Hades wasn't the resting place for all of the dead anymore, and maybe someday he could find a judgment from some other force or being that was beyond the gods themselves, because he eliminated them, and then his anger and vengeance would have been worth it to a certain extent if he could have some kind of reunion with her. But that's never established. As far as we know, this relationship with his daughter was sacrificed twice, once by accident and once purposefully, once because he had ended her life, and once because he had to save her life, or save her in the afterlife rather. And the cycle of that is rather significant. And now that we know in the future with this trailer, which is the main point I wanted to get to, which is sort of the main focus here, which is why I talked about Kratos' children, is that he has given himself another chance, whether intentionally or unintentionally. It's unclear at this point, just through trailers. I'm sure we'll find out while playing the game, but through some means or another, he has gained himself another child, and this child he is determined to do right by. He is determined to keep away from his rage that cost his daughter not only her life, but her happiness and her union with him, and her livelihood that she could have had. So it's obvious that Kratos, through the trailers, wants to train this child to be a warrior so that he can preserve his life. He hasn't grown beyond, someone who believes in defenses and attack, and to, utilize your environment and take advantage of the, life forms around you, and the hunt to preserve yourself as an individual. He hasn't foregoed these teachings that he has lived by all of his life, the teachings of combat, but he also has chosen to keep the secret of the gods and the slaughter of them and the killing of his wife and child from this new child. So Kratos is going through an entirely new arc, and his new child shows anger at him from keeping the truth from him, which can allow for so much more to be explored in this new game, and I am so excited for it. It's going to be a definitive moment in the franchise for God of War, if not the finale moment. Anyways, that's it. See you guys next time.